he did?
16 of the witnesses, Amy, said that they saw him with his hands up.
The Interior Ministry was throwing around in the meeting a number of 3,500 as a number they expected to kill when they dispersed the Rab'a Square.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 25 cable stations from Vermont to New York City, on the internet at thestruggle.org, our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. We begin with footage from Democracy Now! To emphasize just one point in the killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson. Prosecutor McCullough ignored the testimony of 16 witnesses in his decision not to press for the indictment of Officer Wilson. Astounding and disturbing. Then to coverage of Egypt and a human rights report about the biggest massacre this century, the bloodbath in Cairo, Egypt, in Rab'a Square in August 2013. Our news of Palestine starts with a video in Jerusalem. 2 American women told to get off the sidewalk and go to the opposite side of the street because they were of the wrong religion. Then to Hebron, where mountains of tear gas were used to stifle a protest of Palestinians. We begin with Ferguson. The prosecutor led us to believe that the witness testimony was all conflicting. But listen to what Amy Goodman and a Lehigh professor, James Peterson, discuss on their program.
I was watching Joe Scarborough, a former conservative Congress member, on Morning Joe on MSNBC today, saying, how dare they do this? It's based on a lie. Now, you also have the members of the National Football League, St. Louis Rams, taking part in the act of protest before the Sunday football game. During the player introductions, a group of players took to the field with their hands raised overhead, hands up, don't shoot, in solidarity with Mike Brown. The police said an official with the Rams apologized, but the Rams executive vice president told the St. Louis Post-Dispatch he didn't apologize, merely told police he regretted any offense they might have taken. But this idea that has come out of McCullough's description of what grand jury witnesses said, that in fact Michael Brown's hands did not put his hands up. Wasn't something like 16 of the 18 witnesses said he did?
16 of the witnesses, Amy, said that they saw him with his hands up. How is that a lie? I really don't understand that. Now, the law enforcement response to the St. Louis Rams protest, to me, seems to be a little bit desensitized to the situation as well. Remember, so we can debate back and forth. There were some people who didn't see, but there were at least 16 witnesses in that grand jury who saw Michael Brown with his hands up, including the young man who was right there, who was a part of that whole situation. And so I'm not sure who we're supposed to believe or what constitutes a lie or what constitutes the truth. But what I would say to my colleague, Joe Scarborough, to the law enforcement in St. Louis is, if we had an indictment and could have properly had a trial by jury where the evidence could have been vetted and publicly engaged, we might be able to figure out what the truth in this situation is.
The prosecutor McCullough did not ask for a trial, even in the face of the testimony of 16 witnesses, raises questions about his intent and competence. Should disbarment proceedings be raised against him? Now to a conference at the University of Bridgeport concerning Egypt. It begins with Omar Shakir, who worked on a report for Human Rights Watch about the immense massacre of 800 to perhaps 1,000 people by the Sisi regime in August of 2013 in Rab'a Square.
It's such an important conversation in so many ways, not only because the very idea of human rights has become almost a dirty word in Egypt, and it's so ironic, 3.5 years after so many of us in the world had our eyes glued on the powerful movement in Tahrir Square that you can't even have a protest anymore in Cairo. without arrest and facing excessive force. And it's also an important conversation because, as you'll hear later in today's panel, so many in the international community, including the US, is ready to go back to business as normal with this government and really overlook and ignore the very dire human rights situation. Because I'm going first in this panel, I really do want to focus on Rab'a and the mass killings of last summer, not only because of the enormity of the crime that took place. In our estimation as Human Rights Watch, one of the largest killings of largely peaceful protesters in a single day anywhere in the world in recent history, but also because that was such a foundational moment where the regime took the one-way path towards very deep repression. In the aftermath of the overthrow of Morsi, which had some popularity in Egypt at the time, but really the killings that took place in July and August, sealed with Rab'a, really was the decisive moment where this regime embarked on that path. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about Human Rights Watch, about the investigation that led to the report in the video you saw about, and I'll end by kind of sketching the context of that event, but also bring you to today and let my panelists to my right fill in the rest. So to start with, for those unfamiliar, Human Rights Watch operates in over 100 countries in the world. What we do is investigate, document, expose, and advocate around human rights abuses. And over the course of 3 decades almost in Egypt, Human Rights Watch has documented abuses under successive regimes, including under Mubarak, including under Morsi, and in the current period. So in producing All According to Plan, we undertook a 1-year investigation. That investigation included interviews with over 200 witnesses, including people who attended the demonstration, including local residents that were in the area of each of those demonstrations. We documented not only Rab'a, but 5 other massacres that took place in July and August 2013. In addition to those interviews with 200 witnesses, we were on site during the attacks at each of those protest locations. We went to the hospitals and morgues. We looked at the bodies. We reviewed physical evidence. We reviewed hours of physical evidence. We reviewed statements by Egyptian government officials. We sought to interview Egyptian government officials, but never received any responses to our many letters, except when we were denied entry into Egypt. So let me start by talking a little bit about the day of Rab'a, and I will then go back a little bit and then go forward in the context of my remarks. For those unfamiliar, as this video indicated, in the aftermath of the July 3rd military ouster of Mohammed Morsi, really tens of thousands of Egyptians took to the streets really throughout Egypt to protest their dissatisfaction with that decision and call for Morsi's reinstatement. And the center point for that movement was in Rab'a Square in eastern Cairo, where you had a 45-day open-ended sit-in, where you had many Egyptians who were camped there saying, we're not leaving until Morsi is reinstated. Human Rights Watch visited the protest encampment many times during the course of July and August. It was a largely peaceful sit-in. There were women, there were children. We used aerial footage from one day in early August to estimate there were 85,000 protesters on the particular day for which we obtained the aerial footage. The Interior Minister, Mohammed Ibrahim, himself has said on the morning of August 14th, on the morning of the Rab'a massacre, there were over 20,000 demonstrators in Rab'a. So what happened, in short, as you saw in the video, is at dawn, around 6 a.m., security forces approached Rab'a Square. They approached from each of the major roads that lead into Rab'a Square. They approached led by bulldozers, flanked by armored personnel carriers, hundreds of ground forces, police, but flanked by the military, which secured the perimeter of Rab'a. Security forces claimed that they issued warnings when they approached Rab'a, saying that we will not open fire on protesters, or that we will provide safe exit for protesters who want to leave. However, the vast majority of folks that Human Rights Watch interviewed, including local residents, never heard those warnings that were played at one or two of the entrances. In addition, they almost immediately resorted to live ammunition, in addition to non-lethal fire like tear gas and rubber bullets. By 6:30 a.m., Human Rights Watch was receiving calls from doctors in the field hospitals in Rab'a Square saying we already have injured and dead protesters. And what security forces did, as you saw in the video, over the course of the morning is they converged on the center of Rab'a, providing no safe exit. So women, children, men that wanted to escape the violence had nowhere to go. And the way in which security forces opened fire wasn't a matter of pinpointing armed elements in the demonstration. It was really a case, and this is very obvious from the video footage you review, of opening fire on crowds of protesters. Just to give you perspective on the fact there was no safe exit, the entrance to Rab'a Hospital in the square was known as Sniper Alley, because anyone who entered or exited Rab'a Hospital for about 10 hours in the core part of the day, faced the prospect of sniper fire. And Human Rights Watch saw this and interviewed dozens of witnesses that had to brave the sniper fire to enter the hospital. So over the course of the morning, again, security forces approached, destroying everything in their path, tents, and gradually boxing protesters in. By mid-morning, protesters, which many of whom had rocks and some of whom had Molotov cocktails, were able to slow the advance of security forces. But by 10 a.m., the hospitals were overflowing. Not just the main Rab'a hospital, the field hospital, Rab'a Mosque, different halls in the square were filled with injured and dead protesters. And after a brief midday lull, security forces finished the kind of final push into Rab'a Square, in which Mohammed Ibrahim, the Interior Minister, has said on public TV in Egypt that he gave the orders to purify buildings in the center of Rab'a. And during this final push into the center of Rab'a Square, security forces, the evidence indicates, burned many facilities, including Rab'a Mosque, including Rab'a Hospital, and they actually opened fire into the hospital, as you saw depicted in the video. At the very end of the day, of course, there was a safe exit after 10 hours of besieging protesters for the protesters that remained. However, many weren't able to leave through the safe exit and were tortured, in some cases even summarily executed. So taking a step back, why all this time on Rab'a, an event that was a year and a half ago in the context of daily abuse in Egypt? The reason is that we're talking about a killing on the scale of Tiananmen Square, one of the worst killings of demonstrators that we've seen as Human Rights Watch. Just to give you anecdotal perspective, when I was undertaking this investigation, I sent an email to every Human Rights Watch researcher in 100 countries around the world. I'm like, literally asking, has anyone in their countries ever seen, we documented by name 817 people killed in 12 hours, but the evidence indicates over 1,000 in their countries. And the only comparable examples that are even in the same ballpark were the Anjan Massacre of Uzbekistan in 2005 and Tiananmen in terms of recent history of demonstrators. Of course, and that number is likely an underestimate. We think it's under 1,000 for a lot of reasons. I'm happy to go into a Q&A, including the fact that the government really didn't let people in. There are many unaccounted for bodies, etc. Of course, security forces justified the Rab'a dispersal by saying it was an armed sit-in and that they had to clear weapons from Rab'a Square. But at the end of the day, on August 14th, the Interior Minister, Mohammed Ibrahim himself, said that security forces found 15 guns in Rab'a Square, in a protest that he said had over 20,000 people. And at the end of the day, there were 8 police officers killed. Even in war, 8 police officers to 817 protesters would be disproportionate. But we're talking about not war, but a peaceful demonstration in the center of Cairo. Moreover, if you look at videos from Rab'a, it's very clear that security forces were standing in plain view. They weren't afraid of receiving fire. And they had snipers on rooftops that were gunning down at crowds of demonstrators. They also have justified the Rab'a massacre by saying that there was incitement, that there was anti-Christian sentiment, there was abuse, there was torture. Even if these allegations were true, the fact is the response simply wasn't proportionate to the abuse that took place, and certainly security forces did not take the precautions necessary to minimize the risk to life. So I want to now give a little bit of context about what happened around Rab'a, and I'll end with where we are a little bit today. today before I pass it to my other panelists. Rab'a was not an isolated event. It actually came in the midst of 5 other massacres. So let me briefly give you that chronological narrative. The military ousted Mohammed Morsi on July 3rd. On July 5th, security forces gunned down 5 protesters outside the Republican Guard headquarters. One of those protesters, it's documented in pictures you can find in our report, All According to Plan, literally was putting a poster of Morsi on the fence of the Republican Guard headquarters. And you can see the images. He's walking across the street, he's sniped with a bullet in the head. 3 days later, on July 8th, in the exact same location, around Fajr prayer, morning prayer in Egypt, security forces opened fire and killed 61 protesters in the same location. In the course of the next 2 weeks, you heard all sorts of incitement about the Brotherhood, about them being terrorist groups, about heavy weapons being in Rab'a. And on July 4th, Abdel Fattah Sisi took to Egyptian TV and asked for a mandate to fight terrorism. That Friday, July 26th, tens of thousands of Egyptians took to the streets to give Sisi that mandate, and that very night, security forces gunned down 95 protesters right outside Rab'a Square in the Massacre killings. The next day, on July 27th, our investigation indicates that security forces and the leadership of the Egyptian military and police began planning the Rab'a massacre. So what evidence do we have that this was a planned killing? You know, it's a very big claim to say that this wasn't excessive force but a planned killing. Let me give you a couple of data points, and I'm happy to, in Q&A, go into it in more depth. The first thing is Mohammed Ibrahim, the Interior Minister, on August 31st, gave an interview with Egyptian TV in which he was asked, how many people did you anticipate killing in Rab'a? And his answer was about 10% of the protesters. And he said there was an international law norm that allows you to kill 10% of protesters at a demonstration. As an international lawyer, I can tell you there's nothing to that. And then he was asked how many people were there, and he said over 20,000. So his own admission, they had a plan to kill over 2,000 people. Then, on September 11th, 2013, then Prime Minister Hazem al-Blawi told al-Masri al-Yom, he was asked how many people were killed in Rab'a, and he said about 1,000. But that was much less than what we expected. We expected to kill many more, right? Now, rewind the tape. Before the Rab'a massacre itself, Human Rights Watch interviewed somebody who attended a meeting with the Interior Ministry on August 5th. And that individual told Human Rights Watch that the Interior Ministry was throwing around in the meeting a number of 3,500 as a number they expected to kill when they dispersed the Rab'a sit-in. I could go on and on with evidence. There's many other things. We have 188-page reports. I'll spare you that, but our evidence indicates that what happened in Rab'a was not only a case of excessive force, but a crime against humanity. And what a crime against humanity means, in short, in layman's terms, removing the legal definition, is first-degree murder as state policy, right? A state policy to state-sanctioned slaughter, in essence. And that is the conclusion that Human Rights Watch indicates likely was what happened in Rab'a, based on political affiliation. And our report names the names of specific people in the police and military that we believe should be investigated for their role in planning and carrying those out. Those names include, I'll just list a couple, Mohammed Ibrahim, who has acknowledged that he formulated the dispersal plan and oversaw its implementation. It includes Abdel Fattah Sisi, who is now the president of Egypt, who at the time was Deputy Prime Minister for Security Affairs, for which he had command and control responsibility over the security forces. And Sisi himself, on August 19th, said, quote, I spent very many long days discussing the details of the Rab'a dispersal. And Medhat Minshawi, who was the head of the Special Forces of the Egyptian police, who bragged in an Egyptian newspaper that he took a call from the Interior Minister the morning of Rab'a and told him, we will attack whatever the cost. So I have 1 minute, I'm being told. So let me, and I have a lot to say. So let me just say 2 quick things in my last minute or two, which is, first of all, the reason why this is incredibly, why did we do this report? And as you saw in the video, we're calling for UN Human Rights Council to open an investigation into the killings. The reason for that is 1 year later, there's been no accountability. There's not been a single member of the police or military that's been investigated, to our knowledge, or put on trial. Instead, bonuses were given to all the police officers that participated in the Rab'a massacre. Rab'a was repainted, rebuilt, and they built a monument to the police and army in the center of Rab'a Square. So for victims of Rab'a, and you'll hear from one or two of them today, there's been no justice. Many of them are still being persecuted, hunted down for nothing more than their political beliefs. But secondly, and this is the point I really want to conclude on, the reason why Rab'a matters, and it shouldn't just matter for people that are politically opposed to Sisi, it should matter to every Egyptian, but actually everyone in the world, because a crime against humanity quite literally means a crime against all of us. It's because Rab'a was the green light for this regime. It saw it could kill 817 Egyptians in broad daylight in a square in Egypt, the very country for which all of us 3.5 years ago followed squares and protests every single day, and get away with it without real consequence. And that was the green light for every abuse you're going to hear about the rest of this panel, including mass arbitrary arrests by the government's own figure, 22,000 Islamists that have been rounded up since the ouster of Morsi, many for nothing more than basic rights. And again, this crackdown has focused on supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood, but is not exclusive to supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood, and includes many of the prominent faces that many in this room might know from the January 25th revolution. It includes routine deprivations of due process rights, roundup, cut and paste charges, renewal of arbitrary detention, systematic torture, long-term and mass death sentences. I mean, I could list you a laundry list of what I spent a year in Egypt investigating, and it leads us to conclude it's the most dire human rights crisis in the country's history. And the reason why we insisted to do this launch in Cairo, even though it ended up in us getting kicked out, is because we wanted the message to be very clear to the Egyptian government that we, and I look in the camera and say this, that we will hold those that committed these acts accountable. We will continue to push until there is redress for these very serious crimes. And I'll end with just a brief note of optimism, which is to say, as dark as everything in this video is, and everything I've said, there remains an incredible resilience among many Egyptians. Incredible, and there's a high level of discontent that you. I guess they cut the mic since I went over my time, but
what happened?
Maybe I pulled it off.
Yeah, I don't understand. Yeah.
There we go. I have to end on a note of optimism, so even if it gets cut off, which is to say that I think things will change in Egypt faster than people imagine, and I thank you for your attention.
Lots more coming about the conference in the weeks ahead. Or go to thestruggle.org and click on our link for the horror house that is now Egypt. Let me remind you, the Obama administration is fully in support of the Sisi gang ruling Egypt. The Rab'a massacre didn't trouble it, nor did farcical court proceedings where 500 people were sentenced at one time for the death penalty, nor the latest outrage, the dropping of all charges against the last dictator of Egypt, Hosni Mubarak.
No, could you just tell me what happened on the street?
We tried to go on the left side, and as we were walking, the officer asked us
what our religion was.
We said we were Muslim, and so they said that we couldn't go.
But we were with a friend who isn't Muslim, and they said that he was allowed to continue walking if he wanted to.
But we said we were American.
And you had passports?
Yeah.
And they didn't care about that?
No,
they just asked what religion we were.
And how old are you, may I ask?
I'm 20.
I'm 20 as well.
Have you had that experience before in your lives?
As we were crossing into the border, they asked us our religion.
Yeah.
Where?
From Jordan to Israel.
At Allenby?
Yeah. That was the first time I've been asked that.
Yeah.
In your life?
Yeah.
While I'm being questioned, yeah.
And so it's a little bit of a surprise, yeah?
Definitely.
Yeah,
we were kind of coming in expecting it.
But
Yeah.
it was still a shock. I mean,
Yeah.
they asked a series of questions and then ended with, what religion are you? Then proceeded to do their markings.
But this was a street that you couldn't walk on because you're Muslim?
Right.
Okay.
And we're not even Palestinian.
No.
Yeah, I see. And you don't mind if I put this on my website, right? Our website?
that's fine.
Okay. Thanks. And what places are you from in the States?
I'm from Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm from Chicago, but
Okay. And can I get your first names?
Alia.
Aliyah.
Nishat?
Thank you so
No
much.
problem.
Thank you.
Finally, to Hebron, where the Israelis are tear-gassing Palestinians. Before I go, I want to mention 2 podcasts on our website. One with Hetty Epstein, who fled Nazi Germany, became an activist in this country for Palestinian rights, and who was arrested at a protest for Ferguson in Missouri. Also, Mark Colville, an anti-drone protester facing a sentence for peaceful actions in the Hancock base in New York State. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. My name is Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.